Shadow work isn't a trend. It's a confrontation with the parts of yourself you've buried, denied, or judged. It's not about fixing yourself. It's about facing yourself. Everyone carries wounds, but instead of healing them, most people hide them behind routines, smiles, or busyness. And what's hidden isn't gone. It festers. The shadow is that hidden part, the anger you suppress, the fears you silence, the pain you pretend isn't there. But here's the truth. What you refuse to face will control you, not consciously, but subtly, in your triggers, your relationships, your patterns. Shadow work is the process of turning the light inward, not to destroy the darkness, but to understand it. Because when you integrate what you once rejected, you reclaim lost power. This isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. In this journey, discomfort is a sign you're touching something real. That's where the healing starts. That's where the soul begins to wake up. The shadow doesn't show up to hurt you. It shows up to reveal you. But most people run, not because they're weak, but because no one taught them how to sit with discomfort. Society says, stay positive, move on, don't look back. But unprocessed pain doesn't vanish. It waits. And the more you avoid it, the louder it gets. Through patterns that repeat, people who trigger you, or anxiety that seems to come from nowhere. Shadow work is how you interrupt that cycle. It invites you to witness, not judge, to look at the wounds without flinching, to hold the emotions without running. Because every part of you wants to be seen, even the ugly ones, especially those. That's where the transformation hides. You don't heal by escaping your darkness. You heal by meeting it, with awareness, with honesty, and eventually, with compassion. And when you do that, something shifts. The pain loses its grip. The past stops running the show. Most of what we call triggers are actually doorways, direct invitations from the shadow to look inward. When something outside you sparks a deep emotional charge, it's rarely about the surface. It's usually about something unresolved inside you. That's the genius of the shadow. It uses your external world as a mirror to reveal the inner one. Every argument, every rejection, every disappointment is a signal, not punishment, but a pointer. It says, look here, this is where you're still bleeding. Most people react. They blame the trigger, avoid the feeling, or numb it out. But shadow work teaches you to pause, feel, and ask the harder question, why did this affect me so deeply? That one question opens the door to integration. Because once you understand the root, not just the reaction, you stop giving away your power. You no longer need the world to change so you can feel peace. You start becoming the source of your own healing. If this is speaking to something deep inside you, pause, take a breath. And if you're ready to keep unfolding this path together, hit like, subscribe, and stay with me. What's coming next goes even deeper. Shadow work isn't about fixing yourself. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. Your shadow holds all the parts of you that were labeled too much, too sensitive, too intense. And because they weren't accepted, you pushed them down. You hid your rage. You buried your grief. You dulled your brilliance. Not because you were weak, but because you were trying to survive. But suppression doesn't erase energy. It just drives it deeper, where it festers. And eventually it leaks through anxiety, burnout, passive aggression, self-sabotage. These aren't flaws. They're messengers. The shadow speaks in symptoms. But when you stop pathologizing those symptoms and start listening, you realize the part of you you've been avoiding is also the key to your freedom. Facing the shadow isn't self-rejection, it's self-reclamation. The parts you hide hold the power you've been seeking. You don't need to become someone new. You need to remember who you were before you were told to forget. True shadow work begins when you realize the traits you're ashamed of aren't shameful. They're misdirected strength. Your anger is boundary energy. Your fear is protective instinct. Your sadness is a signal of unmet needs. Every emotion you've labeled wrong was once your system's way of coping. And when those emotions were rejected by parents, teachers, society, you learned to reject yourself. That's why healing isn't about removing darkness. It's about creating space for it. You don't heal by becoming more positive. You heal by becoming more whole. When you invite the shadow in, not to control you, but to be seen, it softens. It stops screaming. You begin to understand that the shadow isn't an enemy. It's your younger self, still waiting to be acknowledged. This part of you isn't broken. It's frozen. Shadow work is the art of thawing, of turning numbness into presence, shame into strength. You don't integrate by force, you integrate by compassion. That's how light gets in. The deeper you go, the more you see how the shadow isn't just emotional, it's ancestral. Many of the patterns you carry aren't yours. They were passed down silently through generations of people who were never taught how to process pain. Their wounds became survival strategies, and those strategies became your personality. This is why shadow work isn't just personal healing, it's lineage healing. When you break a pattern, you're not only freeing yourself, you're shifting the frequency of your entire bloodline. And it doesn't require perfection, it requires presence. Just witnessing the anger that's not yours, the guilt that doesn't belong to you, is powerful. It sends a signal to your system. We're not abandoning ourselves anymore. That's evolution. That's spiritual maturity. You don't become a new person. You return to who you were before you learned to hide. Shadow work is sacred because it reclaims what was buried. It's the art of coming home to yourself, fully, honestly, without fear. As you face your shadow, you may feel like everything is falling apart, but in truth, everything false is falling away. The masks you wore, the stories you believed, the pain you inherited, they begin to dissolve. And what's left isn't emptiness, it's space. Space for your real self to emerge. But don't expect it to happen overnight. Shadow work unfolds in layers, like peeling back years of unconscious armor. Some days you'll feel raw, some days you'll feel free. That's how you know it's working. There is no finish line, just a deeper relationship with yourself, built in silence, in stillness, in moments where no one is watching. This is the soul's path, not to escape darkness, but to integrate it, to walk with it without fear, to say, I see you, and I choose love anyway. That's where the power is, not in pretending to be perfect, but in showing up as real. Real shadow work doesn't end with awareness. It begins with what you choose to do next. Will you ignore what you've seen, or will you let it change you? Because healing isn't a light switch. It's a commitment to yourself, to truth, to wholeness. Some wounds won't close in a week. Some patterns will scream as they die. But if you stay with it, if you keep meeting your shadow with courage, your life begins to shift. Peace won't always feel loud. Growth won't always feel comfortable. But you'll start to recognize yourself in the quiet, in the space between reactions, in the strength it takes to stay open. This is how you reclaim your energy, not by chasing light, but by integrating what's been hidden, not by bypassing pain, but by honoring it. That's the real alchemy. That's where the soul expands, and it's where your transformation truly begins. What part of your shadow do you feel still hides in silence? And what would happen if you gave it a voice today?